Big Boy interview, take one. Marker.
Hello, your partner Big Boy from Big Boy's Neighborhood. Some people say radio legend, so do I. But this right here, this is my life story.
All right, so yeah, we're just gonna start from the beginning. So basically, talk about like where you grew up and kind of your relationship with your mother.
I was born in Peoria, Illinois. But Peoria, Illinois, I was there not even 2 years. And from Peoria, we moved to Los Angeles. And once we got here, it was, my mom, pretty much a single parent, 7 kids. We definitely wasn't anywhere close to being rich, but we was affluent when it came to love. I heard I love you. I heard, there was hugs, and it was just one of those households where you didn't realize how bad things were until you kind of got a little bit of age and said, okay, there were, many evictions when we were growing up. You learn how to do without, and you don't even realize you're doing without because some of your peers don't have it. Not having a father in the household wasn't strange to me. I never had my dad in the household. So it wasn't like a dad walked out and I was able to miss something. So just growing up, I felt happy, and it's crazy because when I wrote my book, I wrote that from that viewpoint where I was like, oh, it was a happy childhood. And then I started doing some therapy. And I was like, well, shit, maybe it wasn't as pleasant as what I thought. But just growing up, my mom, I have 4 sisters, 2 brothers, just acting in the house, putting on plays. We entertained ourselves. We didn't have mobile phones, of course. You didn't have 5,000 satellite channels and all these streams available to you. So you had a lot of conversation and you had a lot of time to speak with your peers or with your family. But growing up, it was music in our household. You could smell my mom's cooking. From what I gather, it was the perfect place for her son Kurt to grow up at, the house that Ida built.
Mm-hmm. And if you could just talk a little bit about your father also. I know he wasn't in your life, but you kind of talked pretty definitively about him and like his passing. And
yeah, when it came to my father, I didn't have a relationship with my dad at all. Like, I don't remember a voice. I don't remember a scent, just wasn't around. And at one point I felt like, okay, well, I didn't have a connection with my dad at all. And my mom never spoke ill about my father. She never said, if he was here, we would be in a better position. He ran out on you. None of those things. So I didn't have such a strong negativity on someone that wasn't there. And I thought that I wasn't affected by not having a dad. I didn't at the house. I never thought I had daddy issues. You would hear certain things and, oh, he has daddy issues. He have daddy issues. And I didn't have daddy issues. Anyone that read my book understood that I didn't have daddy issues. And once I went, just even up until last year, I went to a place and I did, I was there for like seven days, and you do 2 days of integration. And I realized my relationship with my dad did have patterns that affected me. And I did have daddy issues that I never knew I had for like 50 years. But coming home one day, my mom was, in the room, and I walked in and she said, your dad died today. And not being cold, your dad died? What's for dinner? It wasn't like I had this breakdown because, I could probably cry over a rock more than I could cry over my father. Now, the image, once I got a little older and did a little bit more work, the image of what a dad is and how I parent, I realized that I do have, and I've had patterns as opposed, for the absence of a father in my life.
If you could just talk a little bit about you kind of moving from motels to homelessness a bit, and I think you said you were acting like everything was fine because maybe in your mind you thought it was, but you were using like humor and food to kind of like, sort of like get through those times.
And just kind of growing up, it's 8 of us in the household, 7 kids. And my mom hit financial slippery slopes. My mom wasn't, she didn't smoke, she didn't drink, she didn't have a drug problem. There wasn't like, what are you doing with the rent? It's just taking care of 7 kids and yourself. Do you buy your kid this sometimes, or do you pay the rent? And we got into a slippery slope where we got evicted. And being evicted, there was a stint of over a year of living in motels, not hotels, I mean motels. All 8 of us, any motel that you see that's probably between 350, probably 400 square feet, 8 people in there, 1 bed, so you kind of sleep on the floor and you lay where you can. And it was just those things where, you could stay a week here, probably a month here, a couple of days, but we were constantly going from motel to motel. And there's times when I do this thing called reality runs. In my reality run, I'll go by some of the old neighborhoods that we've stayed in, or I'll go by, some of the motels that we stayed in. And I remember one time it was just a strip, and when I was pointing it out to someone, they couldn't believe when I was like, oh, we stayed here, we stayed there, we stayed there, we stayed, literally moving your stuff from motel to motel, either next door or across the street. Growing up, we never had like a family car, so everything was kind of just on the bus, or with the motels, you just moved how you could. Shopping cart, you go to the next one, But it's wild because in my mind, at the age of like 10 is the first time we became homeless. And at the age of 10, you want a home, that your friends and your peers are going to their homes. But as a 10-year-old, you're thinking, okay, I have a swimming pool. As a parent, I couldn't imagine what that did to my mom, because I couldn't imagine what it would do to me now that I'm a parent with 2 kids. But she shielded us as much as she could, but there were some things that, you did know. You would have to hide when the maid came, so they wouldn't know how many people were in the motel, and you get kicked out once again. I got accustomed to eating out of paper plates and plastic forks and putting your cold, refrigerated items in a cooler. And some of those things I still do to this day. Like to this day, I got every piece of fine, kitchenware, and I got great spoons and forks and all that, but I eat out of eat with plastic forks and spoons and paper plates to this day. I'll go and literally buy them out. And that comes from growing up, younger and experiencing things such as that.
At one point you talked about there were a couple times where you had to sleep on the street, maybe in Santa Monica, but you would still go to school the next day, even though you kind of spend time on the street, and you kind of would just act like things were normal, even though you were kind of living in these circumstances.
You definitely learned the art of disguise. The everything is okay. Even times when we stayed in, the church, the Sunlight Mission, times when we, slippery slope, and we had to sleep outside at the Santa Monica place. You do learn how to, when you're walking home from school, your friends go one way, you walk a little bit with them, say goodbye, then I'll cut back through the alley and go back to the church or go back to a motel. So you did know that you had these secrets that either your classmates or your peers or a lot of people didn't know unless they lived in the same motel that you lived in. Did people know that the Alexander family stayed in a motel? Probably. But at the age of 10, I didn't hear a lot of, oh, you guys, are homeless or you don't have a place. But as a 10-year-old, all I wanted was an address. And in my head, I could say, oh, we had a swimming pool. I didn't know how bad it was, and I didn't. But you did yearn for an address. You yearned for a roof over your head that was yours. You yearned for, someone not being able to tell you, you got to pack up all your stuff and you have to leave. Those are the things that get deep rooted into you as well, and it follows you into your adulthood by how you live and what kind of patterns you have. How you make sure that either your bills or it's a lot when you learn so much at an early age, and so much that a child would have to bear. And then as you start to get older, you start to see how it really affected you.
And at the same time, like hip hop is sort of in its infancy and you're kind of getting introduced to that as it's sort of becoming a thing. You talk about Rapper's Delight was kind of like your first step into hip hop, and you had experience with your friend Trevor, like maybe you could tell a couple of those stories.
With hip hop, for one, music was always in my household. You know, growing up, Jackson 5, anything Motown, we always heard music in the house. The Commodores, it was always something. And then comes this thing called hip hop. And hip hop was, when I heard like Rapper's Delight, the full extended 15-minute version, it was like music I always had. If I didn't have, you know, a bed, if I didn't have a pillow, I had a transistor radio. I had, you know, some headphones that I could possibly make, but I always had something where I could listen to music, and music always took me away. So with Rapper's Delight, I had a buddy by the name of Trevor, and Trevor also lived in the same motel that we lived in the Santa Monica area, and we would walk together to the Boys and Girls Club, and that's all we would do to pass time. We didn't have money to take a bus. We didn't have bikes, you know, we would just walk and literally hip hop, the hibbit to the hibbit, and, you know, and we'd just trade and rap this to the boys club and rap it on the way back. But I fell in love with hip hop. And early on I had hip hop, and then I realized I had a connection with food. You know, that those kind of things were always, if I was sad, I listened to music. If I was sad, I ate. If I was happy, I listened to music. If I was happy, I ate. All those things together was always kind of there for me, you know. So that was kind of a thing that I always went back to, was, you know, music was good for me and I enjoyed it, but food was as well, and I didn't realize what I was actually doing to myself as a child growing up.
I think you said the most important things in you at the time were your mother, hip hop, and food.
That was definitely the most important things to me, you know. Mom, you know, hip hop and getting that escape, and also food being there for me. And again, you know, anyone that kind of read my book also, I had this, you know, happy relationship. I thought that, you know, I was good with food. No way in the world you can get over 500 pounds and not have an addiction to food. And it was just recently that I realized how much out of control I was, and how that really was a go-to place for me. You know, it was like a relationship that I had that was like, you know, I'm here, you're here, I'm sad, you're here, I'm happy, you're here, I'm celebrating, you're here. I wrapped so much around this love affair that I also had with food, and not knowing, you know, I mean, you know, as a child, it was comforting. And then once you got older, you realized that you really had like an addiction and a serious love affair with food, because it was always there. It was always something I could rely on and depend on. And even, you know, from the best to something mediocre, it was always there.
And just going back to hip hop a little bit more, you had other influences at the time where, you know, it was like Ice Cube or Run DMC, or like, can you just like talk a little bit about some of the movies and some of the other rappers at the time that were sort of...
Definitely. Early on, you know, I was a child of hip hop. Like, I listened to everything. I bought albums without ever hearing who the artist was. I just purchased it. I bought, you know, cassettes, even before CDs. I would just buy and I would listen to everything when it came to hip hop. And once I got into like my teens, and I mean early teens, like, you know, 13 years of age, 12, 13, 14, I was able to, you know, get a turntable and really listen, but I always had headphones, and I listened to music. I listened to hip hop different. You know, I listened to if the scratch went from one ear to the next ear. I listened if it had like a little reverb on it. Like, there's some people that just listen and kind of bob their head. I analyzed hip hop. I listened to the lyrics of hip hop. In headphones, you could hear somebody took just a slight breath before they went into, you know, their next rhyme. So I was always intrigued early on by, you know, when I got an introduction to to Run DMC. You know, when I got an introduction to, you know, Treacherous 3 and Who's This Guy, Kumo D, when I'm watching Beat Street and learning about all these people from the East Coast. The East Coast was a world away from me, but I'm knowing like, oh man, Melly Mel is in Beat Street, and he got Beat Street Breakdown. I love Melly Mel as an artist. That's one of my favorite rappers, you know, and watching, you know, Kumo D and watching the early Dougie Fresh and watching this thing that I fell in love with on the big screen. Like, I'm getting dressed to go see Beat Street that got Mr. Wave and they're pop locking and there's graffiti. I lived that. Not knowing that we're gonna, many years down the line, celebrate 50 years of hip hop. I just love what I was feeling from this music and this genre at that time. When you so-called didn't have anything else, I always had hip hop. I always had music. So I would listen and I would see how Run DMC would dress. And I would look at, you know, how Curtis Blow, you know, how Curtis Blow wore his hair, or how Curtis Blow hit a. I was into everything when it came to hip hop. And then when we started getting hip hop even more so on the West Coast, and I'm talking about early Ice-T before breaking and things like that, man, I just gravitated towards Ice-T as a rapper, as an MC. And then as Ice-T started to take this change of like the 6 in the mornings and, you know, kind of like real stories of life, like what it was in LA, I could truly identify with it now. I didn't know about going to, you know, the Latin quarters, you know, in New York, but I knew about Crenshaw. You know, I knew about Compton, I knew about LA, I knew about Skateland, I knew about World on Wheels, I knew about Venice Beach. So when it came here, man, I didn't think I could love more.
And you talk about it being rebellious and sort of counterculture. And the one thing I really liked that you said was you knew what somebody was into just by the way they were dressed.
Oh yeah.
And I feel like that doesn't necessarily exist anymore because, you know, everything is so internet, you know, through the internet. But I think there was a time where people had a uniform and you connected with people because of that.
And hip hop had a look. You know, you look at it now, for one, hip hop was, oh, you listening to that stuff. You know, oh, it's a fad. Oh, it's this, it's that. So you already had this stigma that came with you even just listening to hip hop. I remember being in high school and freestyling and rapping in the corner and getting called into the office, almost getting suspended because we're rapping in a corner, as opposed to somebody else that's probably taking their lunch break and smoking. You're coming over here messing with us because we're rapping in a corner. But hip hop had a look, you know, and I could spot you from a mile away. And well, mile, that's crazy because who really sees a mile and shit? But I could spot you from a distance and know that you were into hip hop by the way you looked. If I saw you with a Kangol or some Gazelles, I knew that you were into hip hop. If I saw you with some Adidas, you know, with your shoestrings in or out, I knew you were into hip hop. If you had a bomber jacket on, I knew you were into hip hop. There was just this look that I knew you're in the same club that I'm in. Fast forward to where hip hop is now, there's no look to it. You know, everybody does it, everybody loves it, which I love where, you know, where hip hop is at now. But at one point, hip hop was like, oh yeah, you, oh, okay. Like, this is ours. This is ours, and you identified with it, and it made you want to either go up and battle rap somebody, or go up and say, hey man, have you heard the new such and such? You know, or you get into these conversations, or if you rhyme, you kick a freestyle. If you DJ, you'll ask, hey, where did you get your All Not Fish or It's Time? And like, how do you cut? It was something that everybody didn't have, and for those that did have it, it was a very special club to be in, you know, and if you had a membership, you loved it, and you loved the people that were involved with it as well.
Mm-hmm. And at this time, you kind of knew in your head you wanted to be part of the hip hop game or the hip hop world, and you sort of started rapping a bit, and sort of the birth of Emcee Scratch kind of happened at this time. Maybe you could just talk about it like that.
So I always knew that I wanted to be around hip hop. I knew I wanted to, you know, everything hip hop. I wanted to rap. I was a DJ, you know, everything, you know, I would try to do graffiti, everything that came with this culture. I wanted to be a part of it, you know? And so at one point, I started DJing, and I had like no equipment. You know, my first piece of so-called DJ equipment was like our home stereo that had the, you know, it was like a piece of furniture, big wooden piece, and just the record would drop down, and it had no belt, and it was just horrible. And I had another turntable on top of that, but that was my equipment. And I fell in love with the art of DJing. And at one point, my sister Sheila was dating a guy by the name of Roger Clayton. And Roger Clayton, they called him Mr. Prince, from a crew called Uncle Jam's Army. And Uncle Jam's Army was huge. I mean, huge in LA. There's people that can't sell out the sports arena. They sold out the sports arena numerous times on what they call just, there's a dance going on, and Uncle Jam's Army is throwing it. So I remember I asked Roger one day, I said, Roger, man, you know, I want to DJ. What kind of turntable should I get? I'm 13 years of age. He said, well, if you're going to DJ, get you some Technique 1200s. And he might as well said, if you're going to, you know, get a car, get a Lamborghini. You know what I'm saying? Like, because Technique 1200s were the creme de la creme. It was, you know, if you got them, you got them. But, you know, I'm a 13-year-old kid with, you know, a paper route that's knocking on people's doors asking, do they want to subscribe to the Evening Outlook newspaper? If I made $30, I was rich. But, man, it was always in my head, I got to get Technique 1200s. I got to get Technique 1200s. And once I got to that, I wanted to DJ. I wanted to rap, you know, and even my name before Big Boy, I used to call myself Emcee Scratch. And Emcee Scratch, oh my God, to me, that was so clever. Like, you hear a Kanye West, okay, nowadays Kanye, J. Cole, Kendrick, those names sound like, oh man, those names sound empowering. When I came with Emcee Scratch, you couldn't tell me. Like, Emcee Scratch was like, it was clever. It was like, dude, I rap and I DJ. I can't believe nobody else is calling themselves Emcee Scratch. So MC was for the rapping and Scratch was for the DJing. And I went and got an iron-on kit and put Emcee Scratch on my chest with the iron-on letters, and you couldn't tell me anything until I went to a dance and I sweated it out and the letters start falling off. But that's another part of the story that we won't get into. But yeah, I was Emcee Scratch and I lived it. And I would stay on my turntables and I would just scratch it till my arms hurt. You know, I love looking at DST and other DJs and you know, Africa Bambaataa and Zulu Nation and those kind of movements. Like, I would dive into this pool of hip hop all the time and I wanted to be a part of it. So with Emcee Scratch, that was like my way, like, okay, now I have a name. You know, no one knew it, you know what I'm saying? But I had a name and I was also identified with this thing called hip hop, being Emcee Scratch, you know. Thank God I shedded that name. Can you imagine? Radio right now, like, yeah, Emcee Scratch in the morning, you know. Scratch, hey, Scratch, you know.
I do love on your show now when you ask people, like, what do you think of Emcee Scratch?
Yeah.
And they're like,
hey, man, Playboy Cardi was like, who? Like, am I supposed to know this? Like, yeah, Emcee Scratch, man.
yeah, he just went for a while.
Yeah, Emcee Scratch. You know, it's disrespectful if you don't know who Scratch is.
Talk about kind of the hip hop clubs that, you know, during that era, people were there for the music or to kill somebody.
Yeah.
If you just talk about that a little bit, and then around this time too, you met Will Smith for the first time. If you could
Right.
talk about
I met Will Smith. I met Will Smith early, not when I got into radio, but I met Will at a conference. But yeah, it was crazy because I would go see these concerts, like Run's house with Run DMC, and you know, it was Run DMC, Beastie Boys, I think Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince. And I remember I would go to these concerts and I would have the most horrible seats. But I was in the building watching, you know, Fresh Fest, in the building watching, you know, Dr. Dre and the Wrecking Crew. Like, just to be in the building and catching a bus to go to these hip hop concerts and hip hop clubs. And when you started to see that hip hop was a genre where you can go, and we were having concerts now, we were having, you know, dances, there were clubs that was associated around it. I was able to kind of start going to these places a little bit early. And now you can go to a concert and there's probably something that happens, you know, here and there. Somebody's probably drinking, things like that. But I remember early on, hip hop shows, it was like there was a time when they didn't make it to the end. Sometimes, there were concerts that were extremely beautiful, but then there was concerts where you didn't see the headliner. I remember in Long Beach at the Fresh Fest, it was like, Run DMC, Houdini, and it was one of those nights where the headliners didn't make it on because, it was either, sometimes you'll go and it was a great night, or sometimes you'll go and it was a, fist flying throughout the whole crowd, But I enjoyed that too, If my son said, Dad, I want to go to a concert and I couldn't so-called guarantee his safety, I'm like, nah, but I had to be there. When someone talk about Fresh Fest now and like, oh, I remember when Fresh Fest happened and insurance policies wouldn't let hip hop back into the arenas and all that. And I was like, dude, I was there. You know what I'm saying? Like I was there. So I enjoyed early concerts and being a spectator in hip hop, standing in line at, Water the Bush and United Nations, Ice-T's Club and, Zulu and Rhyme Syndicate, and watching like Donald D walk in, or watching Africa Islam, or, seeing Tribe Called Quest for a first time. Those were the things that I was a spectator and I waited in line and I paid to get in, so because I loved and I love hip hop. Like I was there and I got there by any means necessary. I can't even recall being dropped off at hip hop shows. If it was a bus, I took the bus. I had to be there. Walk home from Hollywood because I had to be there.
And at this time, like, it was sort of the rise of gangster rap. That became, Colors came out, I think, around then also. And like, I mean, it was a lifestyle for many, but also a sort of style in general. And you kind of got wrapped up in that, a little bit in gang life, a little bit in the style of it. Can you just talk about that?
Well, I think early on when, there was, and not that hip hop was a street element, it kind of depended on where you were and where you were in your life. Mm-hmm. And with us, it was more, when we were younger, you just got into things, you look back at it and say, why did I do that? So was there affiliations? Yeah, definitely so. Definitely so. I remember when Colors came out, the movie Colors. I remember we couldn't wait to get in there. It was a movie about Los Angeles, Crips and Bloods, LAPD, and then you had Colors, which was by Ice-T, one of the biggest songs. Not that it celebrated gangbanging, but you took from Colors whatever you took from. If you were a Crip, that was your song. If you were a Blood, that was your song. If you were just a spectator, that was your song. If you were a DJ, that was your song. If you're from LA and any surrounding areas, Colors was your song because you identified with it. You didn't, it wasn't like the 5 boroughs of New York. This was like, dude, this is right here what he's talking about. This dude is talking about LAPD, and I know what he's talking about. I've experienced what Ice-T's talking about. And I remember when the movie came out, I saw it at the Culver Theater in Culver City. And they literally had to have like the Crash Force, LAPD, Culver City PD at a movie theater because they were anticipating, fights. It's one of our first movies about LA gangbanging lifestyle. And everybody wanted to be there. And everybody is at some point, maybe you had an affiliation, maybe you was tripping off of something, maybe you were, 1 foot in, and you wanted to be there and you wanted to celebrate this thing called, gangster rap from LA's point of view, and we were there.
There was a point where you were kind of wearing the pressed Dickies and the Pendleton.
Oh yeah.
Maybe just talk about it, and you talked about your
Oh,
mother's kind of response to that.
And even now, you look at hip hop, or you look at the streets or whatever, and people say, oh, I'm this, I'm that. Bloods used to look a certain way. Crips used to look a certain way, and they still do. But you'll see in hip hop, somebody say, oh, Sue Whoop, I'm B-Dog, and I'm like, damn, such and such is a Blood, because there was a look that you had, and there was a way that you dressed. Like I'll look now, and it could be some of the craziest B-Dogs, the craziest Bloods, and They're wearing like skinny jeans and all kind of crazy shit, you know? And when you looked at the way it was back in the days, the same way that I could tell somebody was into hip hop, the same way that I could tell what side of the tracks you were on, where what hood you possibly were from. Even going to concerts, if you wore certain things, like we would literally sit there and say, okay, we got to be gangbang neutral. And you had to know whose hood you was going to, not just red or blue. Maybe you couldn't wear gray. Maybe you couldn't wear green. Maybe you couldn't wear light blue because what hood you were walking into. So you knew those things as well, but you could spot it. And I remember when I started getting intrigued by it, you'll go and you'll grab, your Dickies, you'll go and grab your Pendleton. There was a look that you had to have, And I remember one time I was walking out the house and I was the king of ironing my khakis and creasing them and hitting them. I knew how to hit them with starch so they didn't look crazy and shiny. And I was wearing some Dickies and I was wearing a Pendleton and some house shoes. And I went to walk out my house and I remember my mom went and she looked at me. And then she just went like this. And even walking out, I felt a little like, oh, damn. But it didn't stop me, but I knew that look wasn't like I was going to go play a varsity high school football game. It was a look of, nah, baby. You know what I'm saying? And that stayed in my head. Did it stop me immediately? No, but it gave me like a checkpoint to like, man, Kurt, like, you tripping a little bit. But, you have, one foot in your household where it's like, I always respected my mom, but I also had this thing on the streets that I loved too. I loved being outside. I loved being individual that's a part of something. Like I enjoyed that. I enjoyed, not the danger of it, but I enjoyed my partners and homies. I enjoyed this thing, this lifestyle. I didn't glorify it, and to this day, I don't. When I wrote my book, I touched on it. When I'm on the radio, it's not that I'm running from it. I just don't want to be defined or that be my intro. Former whatever turned radio star. Like F that, So, but I was there and everybody was doing it. Everybody was doing it, everybody around me, and it was crazy because even early on, like I see people now and they're just getting in at 25 and 20 and they got millions of dollars and I'm like, dude, like, why are you banging? But to each their own. But I remember 6th grade, we graduated. That's when you would graduate from 6th grade. Then you went to junior high school when you were in the 7th. And I remember in 6th grade, that summer from 6th grade to 7th grade, we all came back looking different. And that lasts for years,
And the sort of a theme in your life is kind of being at the crossroads and narrowly avoiding the wrong path to go
Right.
down. And whether it comes from a higher power or however you interpret it, there was a moment where your friends asked you to come along with you to like steal a car or something like that, and somebody ended up getting killed. And that was a moment where you realized like you had this, something was watching over you.
It was always something, and it's crazy because to this day I think back to how sometimes there was just like something divine that kept me away from a lot. At one point when we were homeless, we were living in a place called the Sunlight Mission in Santa Monica. And you went to church like 3-4 times a week. And one day I was at church. I went to go up to the front to pray. As I'm walking back up the aisle, I'm literally looking at the path that I'm walking. I couldn't have dropped my head for what felt like a millisecond. Probably looking at my footing and boom, there was a lady in front of me. And I didn't see this lady walk from, the other direction, the aisle. She didn't come from another pew section. She was just boom in front of me. And she looked at me and she said, "Don't let the devil get you." And I'm 10 years of age, but I felt something. Could have been church, whatever. I got this feeling. It wasn't a Holy Ghost, but I felt the impact of those words. And as I started to get older, anything that I did, gray, bad, making a decision, I thought back to don't let the devil get you. I still think about that to this day. I think about honoring my mom. I think about when my mom, shook her head when I walked out the house trying to dress a certain way. So I've always had, I've had enough close calls that I felt, why did God get me out of that? Whatever it is, why I didn't get in the car? Why did I escape the bullets? Why, everybody around me is doing 20, 25 years. I got buddies. It seemed like a lot of my buddies just started getting out at the same time for doing their 25 and 30, 20 to 30 year bids, right? And I always say, man, it felt like someone else could pay my tuition into the school of experience. Like I wasn't, and not that, I wasn't a knucklehead, I wasn't stupid, because they weren't. I just knew like, I don't think I'm gonna go do that. I had the wherewithal, and I would hear my mom, and I knew my mom wasn't on board for how much I was tripping, or how much I could have tripped and F my life off. So just so many like close calls. I remember one time it was some buddies of mine, and they were like, hey, just general conversation, man, what y'all getting into tonight? Oh man, we about to go get this car. We about to go come up. Do you want to go with us? Nah. You know what I'm saying? Do I want to come up? Yeah. Do I want to do something wrong to make some money? Nah, I'm straight. And then it's these two guys, and I'm like, nah, I'm good. So the next morning, I'm taking my nephew to school, and I see those two guys. And I asked them, I said, hey man, did you guys come up last night? And they were like, yeah, we came up. I'm like, oh, okay. I left it there, take my nephew, didn't say what y'all get, didn't do an interview, just, okay, cool. Not knowing that they went and killed somebody for the car and ended up getting arrested and doing over 25 years in prison, and changing their whole life. One of my buddies, man, he came to see me when I was in radio. I love him. But they said that when the police found him, they took the baby. He was at the hospital. They took the baby out of his arms to arrest him and send him to prison. And I get those, I've had those close calls where I was like, that could have been me. I was almost in the car so many times. Situations that could have been worse than what they turned out. I was involved with things where I was like, man, you gotta stop. And I knew that I was destined to do and be more. And there was always something in the back of my head where it's like, dude, don't mess this up, don't mess this up, don't mess this up. And I remember talking with my mom, and my mom was a believer. She believed in her kids, And I remember speaking with my mom, and literally we were homeless. And I told my mom, I said, Mom, one day I'm gonna buy you a house and no one to evict you ever again. And my mom looked at me, she said, I know you will, baby. We're in a motel. She's thinking of how does she pay this rent and still go to work on the bus overnight, like real things. She could have said, Kurt, come on, baby, I don't feel like hearing that right now. But when she said, I know you will, that empowered me. Mom, I want to do this. I want to be an actor. She went and got me all these acting books. Now you got to think, she still has 6 more kids that she got to do this for as well. She got to invest in their dreams. She got to talk to them. And there's not a brother or sister of mine that can say, Mom loved you more. I can't say that to them, and they can't say that to me, And anytime that I felt like I was, off my path or, stepping out of the square, I remember those things. I remember her saying, I know you will, and when you fast forward and make some right decisions, but you also got to crash the car. I've crashed the car many a times. You know what I'm saying? I just didn't crash the car for life life-altering moments. Yeah, knock you off your square a little bit, but I always knew, I was like, man, I'm on a mission. I got to take care of Ida the same way Ida's been taking care of us. My mom grew up hard. My mom grew up, lost her mom at birth, giving birth to my mom. So that was something that the family put on her. Her father was murdered when she was 4, lived with relatives that didn't really take care of her, working since she was 15 years of age. My mom had a hard life. So it wasn't up to me or her kids to make her life harder. Did we at some points? Yes, we did. We're kids. We're kids, and she had a lot of them. But it was my job, my responsibility to make sure that you don't have to worry anymore. And buying my mom a house and giving her the keys to her house and telling her then, again, you'll never be evicted again. My mom owned that house till my mom died. My family owns that house to this day. And that was because I had a dream, I stayed focused, sometimes it got blurry, sometimes my head went like this, then I get right back into it. I just knew that I felt like I had a different purpose.
So just going back a little bit, around this time too, you came up with the name Big Boy. A friend of yours maybe suggested Emcee Scratch wasn't going to work. So maybe just talk about that story.
Oh yeah, the retirement of Emcee Scratch, which Emcee Scratch could have been a legacy as well. You know what I'm saying? I believed in Emcee Scratch, but there was a gentleman by the name of Augie Johnson, and Augie Johnson was in a group. He was the leader of a group called Side Effect. And Augie lived in the same condominium complex that we lived in. And my family knew of Augie, I knew of Augie, and they was like, oh, that's Augie Johnson, that's Augie Johnson. And Augie stayed in one of the buildings where we were living at. So I would see him and, and then I was cool with his son Damon. And one day Damon was like, telling his dad, oh, Kurt raps, Emcee Scratch raps, And so one day, Augie being Augie, he said, man, hey, bro, let me hear something. So I'm spitting my little thing, my Emcee Scratch thing, and, good job. I'm not thinking anything other than Augie heard me rap. And so fast forward, he would believe, like, he was the first one that put me in a limousine. He's the first one that I got, promo pictures from. He saw this kid at 15 years of age, and Augie would tell me, hey, bro, you're going to be a star. You're going to be a star. And I'm hearing from my mom, do what you're going to do. You're special, those kind of things. And then somebody I didn't have to go outside of my household to find, role model inspiration. I saw my mom put polish on her shoes to make her shoes look more white. I saw her get on the bus and ride a bus to work, 3 hours before she had to be there. So I saw inspiration in my mom. Now I have a guy outside that's telling me, man, you're going to be a star. You're going to be a star. And so I'm Emcee Scratch, soon to be this legend. And Augie calls me one day, or we're talking, he was like, yeah, man, I think we need to change your name. And I'm thinking, like, how dare you, bro? I'm Scratch. You know what I'm saying? Like, how do you, dude, I had a couple letters on my sweatshirt still. I still got the R and the T or something that didn't fall off. And so he was like, yeah, man, I'm just going to start calling you Big Boy. And I'm like, Big Boy? What the and every time, and it wasn't long. It was just Big Boy. Hey, Big Boy, we gonna go over here, Big Boy, Big Boy. And I remember he told me, he said, you got to have a name that people would recognize you as soon as they walked into the room. And to this day, I still use that same thing where it's like, what separates you from the room? I wasn't thinking about, oh, people gonna call you Fat Boy. He's calling you big because you're obese, you're overweight. It was a term of endearment that I took, and I've seen where it came from. And it was the birth of Big Boy. Emcee Scratch took me as far as I could. And then Big Boy at 15, 16 years of age from Augie was just one of them things where I lived it. I loved being Big Boy. And at the time, Augie was working with Rick Dees. And Rick Dees, for those that know, locally radio legend, syndicated legend, disco duck, TV shows, like Rick Dees is and was, one of the biggest names in radio. And Augie had a project with Rick Dees. And Rick Dees wanted to do that good loving song over, but he wanted to rap in it as well. So Augie was like, man, I need you to come to the studio. You got to write something for Rick Dees. And I'm like, oh man, Rick Dees. So I go and I write this thing up, you know, and then I give them a learner tape because Augie was going to do the rap. So I give them a learner tape, and Augie was like, I thought Augie was going to do the rap. And he was like, nah, bro, you got to do it. And I'm like, I'm about to be on a record? Like, I can't tell you what that felt like to be on a record. And so I go to the studio. This is my first time in studio, but I felt like I was so prepared that I was just ready. I knew that there was an opportunity there. And I remember Augie asked me, he said, rap for him right now. And I remember I was like, oh man, I'm not gonna rap. And I remember Augie took me to a side and he said, hey man, he said, you probably may get one chance, one opportunity to do it, and always be ready. So I was always ready. So when he told me to pop up over at Rick D's studio and cut that track, I was like, all right, I'm ready. Did it, and the craziest thing to this day, I'll still look at that album cover because the album is called Rick D's The White Album, and on the back it says rap by Kurt Big Boy Alexander. And I would stare at this thing like, Kurt Big Boy Alexander. And that's why when I got my Hollywood star says Kurt Big Boy Alexander. Because I am Kurt Alexander, I am Big Boy. And looking back at that first album, I was like, this is it. That brought me so much entertainment, joy, that I had to live with it.
Maybe you could kind of just talk about it. At this point in your life, you're gaining a little bit more weight.
Oh yeah. The name.
And you didn't really notice, it didn't mean anything to you because it was kind of accepted in your communities, and like it didn't seem like an issue.
Yeah, and even with the name Big Boy didn't feel like, oh, they're teasing you, they're making fun of you, you know? And it's crazy because at Big Boy, I could see the weight gain. It wasn't by the pounds, you know. When you got to the size that I was, I would count my size by X's. Like you could probably look and say, anyone out there could say, oh man, I put on 7 pounds, I put on 10 pounds. I wouldn't know if I put on 7 or 10 pounds. The way that I would know that I gained weight is by the X's in my shirt. And so with me, if someone wore an extra large, you say, oh, I wear an XL. At my biggest moment, I was an 8X. So you don't say extra, but I was an 8X, and 8X means extra, 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 extra large. But at that time, when I'm Big Boy at 15 and 16, I'm gaining weight. And I'm comfortable in my skin because this person is probably big. You know, I'm the cool guy. I'm the guy that can still get a girl, and I'm also the guy that will punch you in your effing mouth. So I wasn't the guy that was teased. I wasn't the butt of your jokes because people knew that I would fly your head off your shoulders. You know, even when I would talk, man, I could outweigh someone by 100, 200 pounds, and I'm calling them fat. Oh, look at you, you're fat. And I'm like, you know, when you start to think about it, like, bro, you're much bigger, but it wouldn't come out of their mouths because I always kind of held my own. Then you think like, you know, you get older and you're like, man, were you really that comfortable? I wasn't, you know, but at the time while we're speaking on it, I enjoyed being Big Boy. You know, if I needed to, you know, get a t-shirt, I went up in extra X. And you got to think, when I'm talking about being a big guy, being a big kid, the first time I heard somebody say, you're gaining weight. Oh, you got big, you're fat. I was 5 years old. My sisters, they went up to the Bay Area with, I guess, some relatives that we had up there. And they were gone for like 3 months for the summer. And when my sister Sheila came back, she was like, oh, Kurt, she said, oh, you got a little fat. That was the first time I heard something about fat. First time I heard you gained weight, all that. So from there on, whatever I weighed then up until, I'm over 500 pounds, I just got bigger and got bigger and got bigger. And you'll look at people now, and there's a lot of big kids and big, younger adults and, well, really teens, preteens. There's some big kids out there. When I was in the 4th grade, I weighed 133 pounds. That probably sounds crazy to some people now because some kids weigh that now. But kids didn't weigh 133 pounds when I was 9. When I was in the 7th grade, my PE outfit was an XL. There's kids that wear XLs now because, the food is different, so lifestyles are different. But when I was in XL, I bought the only XL that was at the school. If there was others, I know I got the last one. I don't know if whoever had the other ones, but I got the last XL gym outfit, top and bottom. So I always was the big guy. I was always gaining weight. And then there are things where, you did at that age notice that what everybody else was wearing, you probably couldn't wear it because it didn't come in your size. And either naivete or being ignorant or not even knowing or just, not being comfortable enough, just kind of shrugging it off. I was also the king of, F it. I would shrug it off. Not knowing that with gaining the weight, I was gaining also this baggage. And I was gaining these patterns as I was gaining weight. And I was learning how to not really let it affect me until I got older and realized like you have a lot of patterns from even your childhood of your weight gain and your obesity.
So this time you got some big, like some medium breaks with like Rick D's, and that's just some things are happening for you, but you still need to make some money. So you decided to turn to selling drugs a bit. One thing that really struck me was that you were selling drugs, but you were doing it with like a conscience. Like there was something in your head that was telling you, can you just talk about like that kind of era?
I definitely was the conscious hustler. You know what I'm saying? The one that knew it was wrong, but how do I find the right in it? Probably even just lying to myself, But there were times when, I did hustle. And by hustling, I mean I did everything. I sold dope, I sold drugs, I did the credit card fraud, I did the phone game with hooking up the phones, But I always would do like, man, I'm done with this, Then I come back to it, I never, and it's crazy because even when you so-called hustling, there's this other thing where it's like, oh man, I'm not strong-arming nobody. I'm not, taking something from someone, but you are, and I knew that what I was doing, I knew it was wrong, and saying you need it doesn't make it right. Like if I couldn't go to my mom and say, Mom, I sell drugs, then I knew that I was doing something totally behind her back. So I would have my, DJ equipment and, oh, Mom, I got to go do a party tonight just to justify these twos and fews, this little money that I was making without having a job. And I'm the type of person that I try to throw everything up against the wall, and whatever I do, I'm like, man, I'm going to be successful in it. I try. And I knew I could have been a very successful drug dealer, And where does that lead you to? Would that lead me to, being dead? Would it lead me to jail? Definitely. But I knew that I could do it. The only thing that held me back from being the top dog, the so-called kingpin, was my mom. My mom, my sister Charlene. There were just some things that I knew wasn't going to fly. No matter how broke we were, no matter if there was a struggle going on, my mom didn't want her money or her son to do that, So I hustled with a conscience, I hustled with a level of, oh, I'm not gonna, go past this, And even with that, just the close calls of knowing like either the ride and dirty or something that, that's on your person that shouldn't be on you, or even, somebody getting a hint of what you're doing. I still live with my mom. I still had lived in a community, and I had enough close calls that not scared me straight, but it straightened me up. Like, I knew I was doing wrong, and even to this day, like when I talk to people, I was a bodyguard for the Pharcyde. That's what I tell people, and that's what I was when I got into radio. I don't paint a picture, I don't run from it, but I don't glorify a past like that. There's some people that'll say, oh, I was hustling, I did this, then I fell into music and I fell into that. And I controlled the narrative. A lot of my family members didn't know that I sold drugs. They read it in my book. They didn't know because I didn't want to dishonor, which I was already, but I didn't want my mom and my sisters to know that their brother, her son or their baby brother was doing this. So with me, I always tried to change the narrative, not lying to anyone, because I did it, and I did it well, and I did it for a while. And when I would stop, I would go back to it. I knew how to do it. I knew that if things got slow or rough, I knew how to make money. But I also knew that it wasn't me, but I did it. And like I said, I did it well. And if you look at anything with my bio says former bodyguard for the Pharcyde. If I would have tried to do this whole keeping it real and for the public and said, this is what I used to do, and so you can look at me like I'm just, oh man, I used to do this and I used to do that, that would have been my full intro. My intro would have been, as opposed to Pharcyde bodyguard turned, radio guy. My full intro, anytime somebody brought me out on stage or brought me on a program, it would have been former drug dealer turned radio star. And I didn't want that. I knew what I was, I knew what I was doing, but that's not who I am for you to define me at that time, not knowing it was gonna be 30 years later, I'd still be doing radio. But even at that time, my first contract, when I was hustling, we hid the hustle. There's some people, like the same way I was talking about, you could see hip hop, you know what I'm saying? You could see gangbang, you could see that. You could see the hustle too, but we hid the hustle as opposed to what you see now. Rapping about it, singing about it, you doing interviews, talking about it. Bro, that would have been goofy stuff to us. We didn't do that. So I tried to control the narrative as much as I could. And I still get uncomfortable with talking about it. And like I said, it's not about running from it. It's just that it's a lot to continue to talk about when you knew that you was on some other stuff back then, but it's a part of my past. It made me who it's a piece of who I am today, and I can't sit here and tell you that I didn't enjoy it. Like, I enjoyed cooking up crack and I enjoyed it, but I also enjoyed life to where I was like, man, you got to stop this. And I'm literally seeing people I know, getting 10 years and 15 years. And then, it was looked at totally different. So, if you had a certain amount of powder cocaine, you walked out. If you had crack, it was a different thing. So I knew that I couldn't do this forever, and I saw people that was with me. I saw them go from sugar to shit. I saw them go from the big dog into like, what were we hustling for if you could only enjoy it for a year and then get 30 years,
One more example of just like fate being on your side is the story about how the cops pulled you over and you had crack in the rim of your hat. Can you just tell that story?
When I was talking about like the close calls, right, and being nervous because you had something on you, I remember one time I was literally walking to go serve someone, right? And I had a cap on, and then the cap, the little rim of the hat, the little sweat rim, I had some 20 pieces stuck in there, like probably 3 or 4 of them. And I'm walking to go sell this, and Culver City PD pulled up on me. And I mean, like, just like a movie, kind of on the curb, and, I'm scared. They jump out, and I got it on me. In your head, instantly, you're already thinking, I'm going to jail. You know what I'm saying? Like, God, this is it. And so when one of the officers, and I know her by name, but I won't call her by name, she was like, yeah, she said, hey, Kurt, guess what I heard? And I'm like, what? She said, I heard that you sell drugs. And I'm doing my most, nah. You know, and I'm sitting here with cocaine in my hat. Drugs. And dude, I remember they took my hat, and when they was about to search me, they took my hat and they snatched it off my head. And when they snatched it off my head, they tossed my hat and they just thoroughly started searching me. Thoroughly searching, you know. And after they searched me, they found nothing. But it's in my hat. Then when they went to go get my hat, she pulled my hat up. And when I saw her stick her hand into that rim, that sweat rim, she ran, and I'm like, this is it. And I'm calculating time and how much I had. And I see her take her hand and she's rubbing it through like this. And she makes a complete circle. Then she goes back in again. Then she flips it down and she pats it. Then she puts it back together and hands me my hat. I take my hat. I put it on. Dude, get out of here. I just start walking like slow, like, what the fuck? And what happened was when they snatched my hat off, the force of them snatching my hat off and scaring the S out of me, the cocaine flew out the hat. And they didn't even think like, oh, let's go over here and let's check. They didn't do any of that. They just, when she leaned down and picked it up, and that right there, I was like, there it is. Don't let the devil get you. There it is. That's somebody putting a ring of protection around you because you're supposed to do better. You're supposed to be different. You're supposed to be everything, the pillar in your community, the person in your family. Like, you're not supposed to be this guy. I felt that, but it wasn't immediate. Like, all my things with me, there's no light switch, you know, like, I got it, I'm stopping. Everything with me is more of a dimmer. You know, it's like, okay, all right, it's getting bright, and then I arrive at, I gotta stop. But that wasn't a thing that immediately made me stop with having that close call, you know, and I've had others.
Talk about, I guess, Paul Stewart is kind of how you, talk about him and how you met a lot of rappers through him, and then that kind of like.
Yeah, Paul Stewart, man. Paul Stewart is the white boy from Crenshaw. Paul Stewart is responsible for so many careers, you know. Coolio, Warren G, Cypress Hill, The Pharcyde, you know, House of Pain, and the list goes on. And I'm talking about responsible for these people. And so Paul Stewart went to school with my sisters Sheila and Sherelle, but I didn't know Paul. I didn't know Paul from there. I just knew Paul as DJ P, and he was a DJ on the scene. And I was a DJ, so I would rent equipment from Paul. And Paul started working, you know, with Power Move, you know, promotion. So he had Power Move promotion / Power Move production. He started promoting records, and he's finding these, you know, these new artists that you never heard of before. He started working with, you know, Ice Cube over at Lynch Mob. Like, Paul was in the business further, in the business that we wanted to be in. So he was like our connection to being on the other side of the hip hop barricade. He was in there. He was in the office. He was in the meetings. You know, he knew people. And so with Paul Stewart, he was just always a guy that shared with you, and he shared his knowledge. And everything, even my career, you know, my career with Paul, it was like Paul, you know, the Baker Boys. He didn't discover the Baker Boys, but so many people from this tree, you were either a branch of Paul and this, that. So Paul was one of those guys, man, that just showed me the laminate. He showed me the backstage, you know. He showed me, you know, what an office looked like when you're in this thing called hip hop. And so Paul just one of those guys that kind of put me in. And there was a rap group that, you know, went to the East Coast, and they had a problem with, you know, some people in I think New York, and they got jumped, you know. And Paul knew me, and he knew that, you know, I was a big guy. He knew I took martial arts. He knew I was good with my hands, and I also had a level head. I wasn't a bully. I didn't grab people, and I never used my size to hurt someone. You know, I wasn't offensive. My defense was immaculate, but I wasn't offensive. And he said, hey, big, you know, I got this group. They just got, you know, into an altercation in New York. I was like, yeah. I said, I know. He said, man, he said, do you think that you can go out with them and do security? Of course. Who is it? He said, oh, some guys called the Pharcyde. I'm like, okay, yeah. So at the time, the Pharcyde was just kind of bubbling in LA. And we had like a bubble of like Pharcyde Freestyle Fellowship, you know, guys from the good life. And so the Pharcyde started to, you know, go on the road a little bit. They dropped a record called Your Mama. And I'm experiencing hip hop now from the other side. And I'm watching this thing grow. That's the first time I'm on a tour bus. The first time I'm really on a plane. I'm at a sound check. Growing up, I never had my own room. Now I'm on the road and I have a key to a hotel room. I experienced so much from being on the road with the Pharcyde. And it was the greatest guys to be with because they were so happy to be a group. They were so happy to be from Los Angeles. They weren't, you know, so-called knuckleheads. They were, you know, just happy on life, dance on stage. And, you know, and at this time, it's like, you know, it's gangster rap over here, but you look over here and it's just this different vibe of West Coast that's going on. And I was able to be a part of that from the ground up. And once they got to, you know, Bizarre Ride to the Pharcyde, the full album, and Passing Me By, Pharcyde just became this phenomenon. And we were out on the road for 2 years with me, but they didn't stop. And I saw so much from this group because of a guy by the name of Paul Stewart that just happened to say, hey, man, do you want to go out with these guys? Same with my guy, Fuzzy. Fuzzy to this day. You know, I was with Fuzzy last night. He was the sound man, you know, and us sitting on a tour bus, driving through the country, and seeing how big America is and seeing this thing called hip hop. And I think that's what made me want it even more, because I was able to witness what other people had, and not in an envious way or jealousy. I was just like, dude, they're on. And I wanted to be on. I knew I didn't want to be a bodyguard for the rest of my life. There was this thing in me, I was too much of an entertainer to be not just a bodyguard, because there's people that know that that's what they do and they do it well. I just knew that I wanted to be an entertainer. I wanted to be, when I would look at them on the mic, I'd be like, damn, I want to be on that mic. You know what I'm saying? So it wasn't, like I said, it wasn't envious, it wasn't jealousy. It was more like looking and like, I want that too. And I had this different urge and this different fire. And they were so inclusive with freestyle, and then you see something, they never talk to you like, oh, you're just security. You know, we laughed, we joked, we were together, was a brotherhood. We had each other's backs. A lot of times when you go somewhere, it was us against the world, not in a bad way, but we knew that we had a responsibility to get these guys home, and that we all made it home safe, you know?
Right, and just going back to like how you, whatever job you're doing, you commit to that job. You talked about just like knowing tick words in different like cities. And, and can you just talk about like kind of what that was?
And I think that I was savvy enough, you know, like I was early on with knowing if you go somewhere like, hey man, what's your tick word here? What's the word you stay away from? You know, you can go to the Bay Area. Bay Area, they say Bloods, but then you go to LA, maybe you're not saying that. Maybe you go somewhere else, you know, St. Louis, whatever. But there's different words, you know. You don't say king here, you don't say folks, you don't say, so not out of paranoia, but I was street enough to say, okay, you know, what's going down here? I was street enough to count the exits and know how we're going to get out of here. I knew how to make sure that the car was turned, you know, backed in, so if something went down, we could drive out. This is my first bodyguarding gig. This is not the bodyguard. This is the streets that I was able to say, let me bring this to here, so we knew. Don't take pictures in the room. Don't give autographs on hotel stationery. It was small things like that kept us safe. And you'll see other people get caught up. And like I said, somebody else sometimes, if you're not paying your own, someone else can pay your tuition into the school of experience. And you look at that and you say, okay, so you see how they messed up? And I was good enough to have some guys that did listen. You know, we were all the same age. We were all peers. But everybody kind of brought the same thing. You know, if I did my gig, they trusted me enough, you know, the way I trusted that they would get on the mic and do an amazing show, you know, and we were just family, and family we kind of rolled together. But yeah, I always made sure that I knew exactly where the hell we were at, you know, and it wasn't about cell phones, you know, as far as videos back then, and you could just go on the internet and just Google something. Like, you had to really be on turf, and you had to talk to people to understand exactly where you were at. You know, I remember one time we were in DC, and I went to go walk, and I'm thinking, well, I never been to Washington, D.C. I just know, oh, the White House is here, you know? Oh, man, I go to the front of the hotel, and I'm like, man, I said, you know, I want to walk to get something to eat. My man was like, I don't think you should walk out here. I'm like, what? He said, well, if you're going to go walk and get something, he said, turn left, don't turn right. And I'm thinking, like, what? D.C. has hoods? Which is such naivete for a dude from California, because I'm thinking we banging. But then I realized the more we traveled, the more a lot of places was just like LA. And not that you're nervous, but you also had to, you know, you had to be on your swivel, and you had to be able to look around and understand that these people are just like where you're coming from. And there's, you know, there's one of these areas in every city and state, bro.
Can you tell the Denny story?
Being from LA, you know, Los Angeles and Cali, but just LA's a melting pot. You know, I had never went anywhere where I was like really racially challenged. Like, really, there's some people that grew up and they just heard certain things because that's just the way it was. That's the law of the land. That's where you're from. South, whatever it is, you just heard different things that I didn't hear in LA. Not that I didn't know that was going down. You know what I'm saying? It's just that sometimes people weren't as stupid or as bold enough to say it here, you know, or you just wasn't around it because they weren't comfortable enough to say it here. And I'm not talking about how people use the N-word as a term of endearment. I don't use the N-word at all. I'm talking about using words that was really cut from the cloth of hate. So we were in Dayton, Ohio. And we were at a Denny's, and we were in such a small area as far as like location, that when you called from the hotel or the motel, room service was Denny's. That's how small this place was. They had a sheriff. You know, we're guys from LA, not knowing how small, and we're not in Dayton, we're on outside some little small town. And so we're walking into a Denny's, and my whole team is in there. I'm walking up, the Pharcyde is in there. Our guy, Rick, who does merchandising, he's in there. And I notice that Rick, I look, and I could tell that he's having like a confrontation, like altercation with someone. I could tell by the mannerisms on his face. Like, and I'm like, dude, what's going on with Rick? And so now with me, it's me and the other bodyguard by the name of Seal. So Rick comes over, and he was like, I'm like, see, I say, Rick, what's happening, man? He's like, oh man, these white boys on some prejudice stuff, you know, saying the real words, SH, and you know. And I'm like, what? And so I'm from LA. I'm 400 pounds. You know what I'm saying? Like, what? So we walk over there, and it was one dude, and I'm like 6'1", you know, and I'm big as a house. And we walk over, and I'm LA-ing these guys, you know, like, hey man, did y'all have a problem with my homeboy over here? And my man looked at me, and he stood up. I'm 6'1", probably wearing some shoes that got another inch on it, you know. My man looked at me. When he stood up, he was probably 5'7", if that. My man stood up and said, what you say, boy? And I'm looking down at this dude, and I'm like, man, I'm about to fuck this dude up. And usually when first he said, if any of you guys got a problem, we'll be right over there. So now I'm like, man, I go and I stand up, and I'm expanding my body, and I look over, and I'm over this dude. I'm 6'1", 6'2", he's 5'6", 5'7", on a good day. My man looked up at me, he said, I said, if any of you boys have a problem, we'll be the over there. And this dude got his girl and his buddies and walked right between us. Escorted his girls right between us. And my boy Seal, we call Seal time bomb. I'm like, Seal, hold on for a second. Because our tour manager, Suave was at the hotel. So I said, let's go talk to Suave real quick, bro. Go to Suave, I'm like, Suave. I said, hey, bro. I said, there's some white dudes over there doing some racist shit, man. He's like, what's up? I'm like, man, we about to go them up. He was like, let's go. So I literally go and I put on some steel-toe boots, put my shit together. We're walking back, and as we're walking back up to the Denny's, we see those same guys walking back in, right? Not in my head thinking, I don't know Ohio. I don't know if it's open carry or if they have a gun or if they went to the car to get knives. I'm from LA and we don't give a. So the ladies walk into the restaurant and the guys are kind of trailing behind them. And I'm thinking it's me, Suave, Seal, we just gonna, get them in a certain way. Seal, who we call Time Bomb, he didn't wait for nothing. He just walked up, and I remember he took both of his hands, and it was two guys, and he just pushed them in their face hard, bow. And I just saw this blood shoot on the window. So now it's on. Man, we just start taxing, beating the shit out these. I'm talking about we beating the out of them. I had never experienced no racism. I had never heard, as I'm walking, somebody say the N-word, like that, challenging. And I remember it was one guy, big guy on the ground, and he was on his hands and knees, and I'm big, and I knew my punch back then. I'm trying to hit this in his face, and as I'm hitting him, he's doing this, and I'm trying to get these choice shots, but every time he's ducking, so I'm hitting him in his head, hitting him in his face, and then when he was on his hands and knees, he had all this open. And so I remember I took my boot and I just kicked him, bow, right in his ribs, and I saw him, and I kicked him again, bow. Third kick, I felt like his whole size just went to mush. We beat the shit out of them and left them there. And I remember the girls who they walked through us, I remember they was crying in the window trying to get out. And I hate telling this story because it sounds so crazy. But Suave was holding the door, laughing at them like, you thought these dudes was gonna protect you on this racist and look at these on the ground out here. And so I remember we ran back to the hotel and we had to go wake up our bus driver. We was like, hey, this just happened. And our bus driver, they could drive by time. He could have just said, nah, I'm gonna leave. No, I can't. Man, we snuck out of that little town. I'm talking about, you talking about spooked. We was bad in Denny's. But when it was time to get out of there, dude, we slid our stuff on the bus, got on the bus, and I remember our bus driver said, close the curtains. So we had the curtains closed. We got a Caucasian driver. They don't know that we're a rap group. None of that, right? And I remember looking out the window, and it was just, how if you're with LAPD or you see the sheriffs, it's all the cars that look the same. It was like a burgundy car. Like they called it must have been all these other areas to come and get us. And man, we were on that bus. I'm talking about, if we were breathing like scared. I'm looking at all these lights. I got the curtain open just a piece, and I'm looking at how chaotic this area looked, because it's just a big parking lot, hotel and a Denny's, motel and a Denny's. So I'm looking at all the lights and everybody standing outside, and we're so quiet and so scared. And we're driving off, and I'm telling you, we're literally not looking at each other, not talking. Get out the parking lot, driving down just a little bit, hit the highway. We feel that the bus is, picking up speed, picking up its miles per hour. When we felt like we got far enough, yeah, that's what the we talk about. That's what we do. The scared black It's in the parking lot. But now when we knew that we were good and we got out, man, that ignorant celebration was was amazing, bro. But yeah, that was one of those things where I was like, dude, that was my first time not knowing that it didn't exist. My mom grew up in the South. My mom's from, Jackson, Mississippi. She's heard everything. 2468. We don't want to integrate. N-words, go home. I know my history, but I had never experienced that, like, right here in my chest. You know what I'm saying? And we dealt with it. I don't tell people to deal with it the same way, but sometimes you can't turn the other cheek. Sometimes you got to turn the other's cheek, and that's what we did.
You said there was this moment that was like the final moment for you.
Yeah.
I guess is it around this time that this happened?
Yeah, this is around the Pharcyde. So I'm with the Pharcyde, and the Pharcyde they had a show in the Bay Area, and I had flights booked for us to go to the Bay. We're looking at TV, and it's like, O.J. Simpson's on a 405, and O.J. Simpson got a gun to his head, and he's with, Collings, and now we're watching this O.J. unfold on the 405. Fellas, we got to go get on the plane. Hold on, no, big, we got to watch this because there is no getting in the car, looking at it on your phone now. That didn't exist. There is no, we're just going to TMZ. I know they got a live feed, or there's something that with DirecTV satellite. Nah, if you walked away from the TV, you were going to miss however this OJ thing was going to play out. All right, we'll get the next one. Still watching. And at this time, I need to get them to the airport because we need to fly out. It's not about missing flights. The next hour, it's like, dude, we got to go to LAX. I already know we got to push back one. All right, dude, we got to go to LAX. I booked us on another flight. And this was back in the days, it was easier to kind of move around like that. So now we get to a point where they're watching this and everybody's talking about it, and now people coming by the house and we can't get the flight out. So we go, let's rent a van and we'll drive up, get situated the night, and then the next morning y'all can go to the studio, then we'll do the show the night because we was gonna go in the day before. So we drive to the Bay Area. And being that we were driving to the Bay Area, I was like, well, if we're gonna drive, I'm gonna bring my gun. So I take my gun with me, and I had 2 warrants for my arrest, right? Nothing too crazy, but I always told my brother, I said, hey, if they ever pick me up on these warrants, I'm just gonna do the time. I don't wanna spend the money. So if I just come up missing for a few days, I'm on the road, or tell mom so she don't, worry about her son being in jail. So we're driving up to the Bay Area. We get there, check in the next day. They do what they have to do. We do the show. So Souls of Mischief, another hip hop group from the Bay Area, the Souls wanted the Pharcyde to stay. I didn't want to stay. So they were with the Souls of Mischief. I said, hey, well, I'm going to fly home. I said, but take my gun and drive my gun back home for me. All right, cool. Up there 2-3 days, whenever. But when they were up there, I had another gun at the house. Now, mind you, I'm like 400 pounds, 450 at this time, right? And so they drive back, they call me, they're like, hey, big, we're home, we got your gun. All right, cool, I'm gonna come and get it. So I'm from LA, I'm on a swivel, whatever, nothing dangerous, but I carry the gun all the time. So I had my gun on me to go pick up my other gun. So I go drive, lollygag, whatever, pick up the other gun, and I'm driving back. So now I got 2 guns on me. As soon as I get to Culver City jurisdiction, because we're living in Culver City, woo! They lit me up. And I'm like, shit. They pull me over. I'm in a white Astro van. License and registration. License, I just bought the van. I give them the registration that I have. So they're looking, so on and so forth. All right. Then my man tells me, step out the car. So I step out the car. Now, literally, I'm going to just go pick up and do this quick run. So I'm wearing a T-shirt, some sweat shorts, and some corduroy house shoes. Nothing else. He gets me out the car. He starts to search me. Search me, go in my pockets, does a thorough search. Have a seat. So I sit down. Any warrants for your arrest? Nah. His partner comes and his partner say something to him. Then he comes back over to him. He said, Where's the gun at? I don't have a gun. Where's the gun? They go back, now both of them in my van, looking for my gun. They come back, stand up. I stand up, my man starts searching me again. Pat, 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 searching me. Sit back down. Where's the gun at? I don't have a gun. So now I'm looking as I'm sitting on the curb, and I'm looking at my van, and now I'm seeing just flying out of whatever door they could throw something out of. And I'm looking, and they're in the headliner. I look in the window, and I can see that he's going to the back, like he's in my van. Comes back out, now it's this one cop that really had a hard on. Where's the gun? I'm like, I don't have a gun. So stands me up, and this time he's behind me, and he takes his hand, but he was slapping me. Pow, 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 pow. Like, I mean, slapping me to where, out of frustration and anger, searching me. Sit down. So now I hear, oh, Kurt Alexander, warrant such and such, Kurt Alexander, warrant such and such. And now that motherfucker just look at me, he like, you have 2 warrants. So we're gonna take you in, and we're gonna impound your van and put it on a detective hold. We're finding your gun. Like, damn. So I'm literally, see the van, the flatbed coming, because they had to wait until the van got hooked up. I see the flatbed, and now I'm like, oh my God, they're about to take me to jail on these warrants. I get to Culver City, they do their quick processing, and they allow me a phone call. So I called my brother, and I said, Mouse, I said, hey, they arrested me on those warrants. You gotta come out and pick me up. You gotta bail me out. And he was like, nah, you said if you get arrested, don't come bail you out. And I was like, Mouse, I said, just come and bail me out. I can't be in here. What's going on, Kurt? No, something's going on. I'm like, Mouse, come bail me out. They arrested me on the warrants. They're gonna take me to the county jail. What's going on? Come bail me out. So now it's almost like a movie. It wasn't a long time, probably an hour, because we lived in Culver City. But it's like a movie where you hear like, Alexander, you made bail. It's like cheesy like that. So I'm walking out, and there's just a door with a little window, and I can see my brother Mouse, and he's trying to make eye contact with me, like, and I'm just looking like, walking. They escort me out, give me my stuff, walk me to the door where my brother's at, still trying to make this eye contact of what's wrong. We walk out, walk down the few steps at the Culver City jail, start walking down the street to where he's parked at. I go under my stomach, and I pull out both guns. I had 2 guns under my stomach in the Culver City jail, right? The bus came at 6 o'clock that morning to take you to the county. And the county does a different search, strip search, pull up your stomach. You know, I knew how to hide my compartments under my fat, put stuff under my fat compartments. So I made it out of that, right? Would have had to do the warrant time if I didn't do the bail. If they would have found the guns, that's a long run, because none of my guns were registered, all that kind of stuff, right? So I get home, and I get to sleep probably about 5, 6 o'clock in the morning. Around 10:30, my mom walks into the room, and she said, Kurt, she said, you have a phone call from somebody named Rick Cummins. And I'm like, Rick Cummins? And I'm like, Rick. He said it's from Power 106. I'm like, oh, okay, that's where the Baker Boys work. So I get the phone call. Hello, Rick. Hey, how you doing, big boy? I saw you once briefly, but I don't think you remember who I am. I'm like, oh, I said, what's up, Rick? Because I didn't know who he was. And he was like, hey, I'm sitting here with Nick and Eric, the Baker Boys, and, we're talking about you, and, I wanted to ask you about, you ever thought about doing radio? And I'm like, nah, I never thought about doing radio. He was like, well, I have a crazy idea. He said, would you like to come in for one night? We give you $35 an hour, and try it for like 4 hours. I'm thinking I'm a hustler, yeah. I'm on the road with the Pharcyde. We're home for, from a Lollapalooza date tour. All right, yeah, I'll come in. So I go in. I don't know nothing about radio, but I know about loving hip hop and loving, and I know timing and so on and so forth. So I do the 4 hours. He called me back the next day, and he was like, "Hey, would you like to try that again?" And I'm thinking, okay, well, shit, I just multiply that by 2. Yeah, I'll be there. Go in, I do the next, 4 hours. He calls me back another day, and he said, I want to try something crazy with you. He said, I would like for you to do our night show at Power 106. And I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, he said, I could, so I meet him. He said, I could teach you radio, but I can't teach you personality. And he said, you have personality, and I would like to sign you to a contract. That's how my radio career started. So if I had still been in jail, on warrants, guns under my stomach, I would have missed that call. Would he have called me back a month later too? Or what if he would have found out where I was? It took me probably 2 years to tell him where I was a few hours before, but I would have missed that opportunity. And that's the one thing that made me say, all this shit gotta stop. It's all gotta stop. And at that moment, I knew that I had an opportunity that I couldn't mess up. I couldn't let my gift be the curse. And from 4 hours on one night, it's 30 years now. And that's what I do. I do radio. I know how to go home. I know how to keep myself out of situations. I know how to respect my wife. I know how to raise my kids. And I know that the world is watching me, and I have a responsibility. And it all came from that one phone call that changed my life. Not knowing that this is how I was going to buy my mom a house. This is how I was going to buy my real first car. This was how I was going to put my sister through college. This is how I was going to take care of my brothers and sisters when they in their time of need. I couldn't F this up. And so I took that from day one, not knowing that a year was going to pass that fast. 3 years, 5 years, 30 years have, 29 years have passed fast, but I knew what I had. And he heard something, and Rick, he just retired. We talked yesterday. He retired yesterday, 2 days, and it changed my life. And I was able to change so many other lives too.
Getting into just like your early run on the radio, you naturally had this sense of humor that people gravitated towards, and you started doing bits like Whispers In and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Can you talk about some of those early bits, and maybe the ones that hold up, like the dreidel song, and
Yeah.
Shaking My Ass?
So when I first got into radio, I remember I told my buddy Fuzzy. Fuzzy was the sound man for the Pharcyde at the time, right? I told Fuzz, I said, man, what am I gonna do every day? So we literally had a notepad, and I was writing down all this stuff. Instead of shout outs, man, I tell the people I got a headache, and we're gonna do whisper ins, where people will call and be like, hey, I wanna give a whisper in to Jonathan Yvette. Back then it was genius. You do that shit now, you're like, that's corny. But back then, genius. And then I had this, it was like, things started to kind of click for me. When I was in 4th grade, I had a teacher by the name of Miss Troop, and we used to sing this song in Hebrew. And when I was singing that song in Hebrew on air, but I was singing that, it was a song, people wait to hear this song, this dreidel song in Hebrew, from a song that I learned. And I was started off, I learned this song in 4th grade. Shout out to Miss Troop. Yeah, she taught us this song in Hebrew. And it goes a little something like this. Boom. And I was singing the song over a hip hop beat, blew up. Then I had another Miami bass record that I used to do called Shaking My Ass. And Shaking My Ass was just, I could never get away with saying shaking my ass, swinging my but I was working for the first 2 weeks of my radio career. I was working with a guy named Richard Humpty Vision. And Richard Vision, he knew radio. And I remember one day he just put on this Miami bass record. And we were just talking. I said, man, this song makes me feel like shaking my ass. And then I just started saying, I feel like shaking my ass, shaking my ass, shaking my ass, shake it. And it blew up. It became a phenomenon. And from there on, I had these radio bits, and you got to think, I never did radio. But what Rick Cummins heard that day when he called me, I had a hip hop line called What Up, WUDD-UP, What Up. And What Up was just the thing that you would call, And if it was a Thursday night, I would give you the rundown on, Thursday night concert, a club, then Saturday night, such and such is coming to town at such and such, theater, whatever. But it was just my way to get my voice out there and put a club on it. I can get in the club for free. That's what Up was. Not knowing that Rick Cummings was calling his line, listening and hearing personality, because I had to do everything in one take. So if I messed up, it was literally me with a phone, with a turntable and a speaker. And if I messed up, I wasn't gonna start from the beginning. If I messed up, I would just rewind the record. So I'd be like, yeah, don't forget, Ice-T's gonna be at. I would literally rewind the record, start speaking backwards, and then let it go. He must have heard that kind of stuff, was like, this guy is a personality. And I got in and shaking my ass, the Hebrew song, everything was just, I was throwing everything up against the wall. And LA hadn't heard a lot like that. I grew up with the original 1580 K-Day, so I knew Russ Parr, and I knew Bobby Jimmy, his character, and the parody songs. So I knew what entertainment was, and I was the family entertainer. So now I'm on radio, and I remember Rick told me, he said, go in there, do what you want to do, just remember the station is called Power 106. He gave me such a big yard to play in. And when I went a little bit past the yard, he knew how to call me back in and put me in the, back in the yard. I remember doing it. We talk about this all the time. I'm a LA kid. So we had this, this one thing where we had like this record, and it was like, hold up, wait a minute, let us put some boom in it. And then it was me, my boy Sean Wan, DJ Ray. We were screaming to the mic, look at here, look at here, look at here now. And then you would name something, because the record go, get on up, get on up, get on up, get on up. So what we did was, one night we'd put names in it, this name, that name. So one night we was like, man, we're gonna do all gang hoods. All gang hoods. We're gonna do Crips, Bloods, and SA, like Mexican hoods. So we thought we were doing something so clever. Rolling 60s, get on up, naming all the Crips. Bloods on Villain, get on up. So we'd do all the Crips. Then Sean wanted to be like, man, Big, take it to the Bloods, man, take it to the Bloods. So I name all these Bloods. And then DJ Ray, my Latino partner, no, we gotta hit some of the Mexican gangs. So we did all the Mexican gangs, a lot of them. Next morning, Rick was like, hey, the thing that you did last night with the gangs. And I'm like, yes, like, don't do that again. Never heard it again. You know what I'm saying? That was in the graveyard. Wasn't quite a phone tap or a Luther Luffeigh. So that, rest in peace to that shit.
That's a good bit, though.
Yeah,
for sure.
man.
That's hilarious.
Ignorant ass shit.
Also, around this time, you started interviewing like some of your friends, like the Pharcyde and Run DMC and Ice Cube, and those people came in and showed you and say that it was a great moment for you, where you're kind of giving back to these people that you were a fan of before.
What's so crazy about it is, even to this day, I still trip off of, someone coming into the neighborhood and I'm on their schedule. That means that they had to go to sleep the night before and say, oh, we got to do Big Boy in the morning. That still trips me out. I still trip out driving and I hear a commercial. I'm like, oh, damn, that's me. After close to 30 years. There's moments, I just had one last week where I'm talking and then I got to tell people over the air, like, dude, I'm tripping because I'm on radio. And I pray to God that never goes away. But early on, I paid to see Ice Cube in concert. I was at a store one time. Ice Cube was in the store. I followed Ice Cube around the store. It just so happened, like, oh, you in the bread aisle? Oh, shit, I'm in the bread aisle. You know what? Oh, my God, dude, you eat Twinkies? I eat Twinkies. Everywhere this dude was at. And now that I know and people do the same to me, you're hip to it. He probably was like, man, this fat but everywhere he was, I was there. And now you're coming to do my show. Like, I tell people, man, I'm a fan first. Snoop Dogg came to do my show. I was on the road with the Pharcyde. Now I'm interviewing the Pharcyde. I was on the road with the Pharcyde and Tupac. Tupac busts in the door. First thing he said was, N-word, man, what the f you doing in here? And we just laughed. You know, I'm in my career, this new career, and I got so much support, but it was so crazy to be the guy that people came to visit. I'm a fan of Run DMC. To this day, I got pictures of my first Run DMC interview. You know, those kind of things. A fan of Curtis Blow. I'm working in the same building with Curtis Blow. You know, any new rapper that's coming, I'm looking at Westside Connection. I'm looking at Mac 10. I broke For Life for Mac 10. I'm breaking records now. My first plaque that I put on my wall was the 69 Boys because I broke that record in LA. And I remember I grew up, I never had my own room until I moved out because I had a radio job. I never had my own room. I remember I had a 2-bedroom apartment in Burbank. Let alone I never had my own room. Now I have 2 rooms. You can't tell me nothing. I would literally walk into my bedroom and then I would literally look back like this and look at my 32-inch TV in my living room with my platinum plaque, with this other bedroom that I don't know what to do with because now I'm rich. I remember my first contract. I called my mom and they paid me. I remember I'm sitting with the Baker Boys, right? And they said, we want to give you a contract. Emcee wants to give you a contract. And I'm like, dude, I don't know what a contract is. So I go sit down with the Baker Boys. And I'm like, hey, you know, they want to give me a contract. How much should I ask for? And I remember Nick took his phone and he typed some numbers in and he handed it to me. I look at the phone and I'm like, I can't ask for that. And he was like, big, just ask for it. You may get it. If not, you'll get something close to it. Bro, I can't ask for that. Just ask for it. I'm like, dude, you think they'll really pay me $35,000? He was like, ask for it. I'm like, oh man. So now I'm sitting down with the bosses, the powers that be, and they have the one sheet, the term sheet. And they're like, you know, we want to sign you to, you know, a year, and this is what we want to give you a year. And they slid the term sheet over. And I looked at it, and it said $50,000. Dude, if they were looking at me, I was probably trembling. I was like, $50,000? I remember I called my mom, and I said, Mom, I'm making $50,000 a year. She was so excited. I called my boy Fuzz. I said, Fuzz, dude, how do you spend $50,000 in 1 year? And I'm going to tell you straight up, in my head, I was rich. I remember I went to this furniture store. And you know the furniture stores that you see like in the newspaper, it'd be like a 5-piece set and dresser and all this stuff that's included. So I walked in and the guy was on the phone. And when I walked in, he did like this, like, and not rude, but like, hold on. And I remember in my head, I was like, hold on. Like, this dude don't know that I'm rich. You know, don't let this sale get out of here. So while he's on the phone, I go to this area and it's like a living room. And he walks over to me and he's like, may I help you? And I'm looking and I'm rich. So I look at him and I said, I want all this right here, sofa love seat. And I bought everything, right? If you see this, it was a black and gold couch, a black and gold love seat with black and gold throw pillows. It was a glass table, like coffee table, with a Black Panther in a creeping position. And the Black Panther, the glass table sat on the Panther's back. Then, because I was spending so much money, he gave me 2 little Black Panthers with diamonds in their eyes. And it was one of those lamps where it's like the multi-bulb lamp, like 5 bulbs over the lamp. And I wanted the whole bedroom set that I saw over there. So I had an aqua, green, and black bedroom set. And I banged into it one time, and it was particle board. So the lacquer, not lacquer, it was a sheet that I was able to peel off. But you couldn't, like I said, you could tell me nothing. And I was like, dude, I told Fuzz, I said, man, I went in and bought everything, man. I'm furnished. And I remember I went and bought silverware. And I never purchased silverware before in my life. I never had my own place. And so I thought I got a good deal, like, oh, silverware, that's cool, you know, set of 4. I remember the first time I ate out the silverware, my mouth, it was like metal, like burnt. Like I bought the cheapest silverware you can get. And I was like, bro, you gotta update, like you're rich. And when I said, how do you spend $50,000, I came from a hustler's background. I never paid taxes in my life. I remember looking at my first check and I was like, who's FICA? You know what I'm saying? And why is this making all this money? I never paid. And I figured out with helping my family, and then I figured out how to spend $50,000 in 1 year. I figured that out very quickly, with taxes.
Talk about the worst interview you had with Bone Thugs.
Yeah. Sometimes people get, like, I get this all the time. Who's your best interview? Who's your best interview? I really don't have a best interview. Like, I love Snoop in the Neighborhood. It doesn't have to be about an album. It's just Snoop, Will Smith, where I love talking to people in the neighborhood. So I don't have a best interview, but I know my worst interview, which is crazy. My worst interview was Bone Thugs and Harmony. Those are my guys. They know that they were my worst interview. We talked about it. It was when I was first into radio. They were just doing like their first interviews. And you got to think, it's me, my buddy Sean Juan. Sean Juan was like, when it came to selling dope, Sean Juan was the guy. And then my partner Ray. So it was me, Sean Juan, DJ Ray. When I got the job at Power 106, I told him, just come and hang out with me so I have a familiar face to just be in the room with. So they came, and then they ended up staying. They became part of the show. So now we got Bone Thugs and Harmony, Eazy-E's group. And we're live. We start the interview off, and it's like, man, Bone Thugs and Harmony, Power 106, whatever it is. How long y'all been together? Forever. Man, all right. How old are you guys? Old enough. So I see that y'all took the bus out here from Cleveland, and y'all went to Tone Log's house. What would have happened if he wasn't home? Well, he was home. I turned the mics off. I'm like, man, this. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not a radio guy. To this day, you can't do that to me. I'm even more green because I'm off the streets. So this is disrespectful to me. So I turn the mics off. They start, walk out the label, the label. And they not like, man, F him. We're on an energy, but I'm telling them like, hey man, whatever the words were, that shit wasn't cool, so on and so forth. And I'm really letting them know that I felt like that was fucked up. And you gotta think, this is a young Bone Thugs and Harmony. And they homies. And then this is a young big boy, Sean Juan and DJ Ray. These are my homies. You know what I'm saying? So it didn't get to where we stood up and mad dog. I don't want to rewrite history, but I remember, dude, when it calmed down, I don't know how to calm down. I walk back in and say something else, walk back out, walk back in. And I remember Busy Bone, and y'all know Busy, the light-skinned brother, which is my guy. I remember Busy had like a 40 ounce, and he was laying back on the couch. And Busy had this look like, all right, we understand. If you say another word, I'm gonna bust you in your face with this bottle. He looked like, I'm done. We get it. Worst interview ever. And now Bone has been some of my best interviews. And we see each other, and that was a moment in time. That was a moment in our hip hop. That was a moment of, people being new. They didn't know how to do interviews. I didn't know how to, I thought I was doing well. I mean, I'm asking questions, but it was just, just young people. You know what I'm saying? And now, we of age, and it's been beautiful. But yeah, I don't know my best, but I know my worst.
Your career kind of skyrocketed to the point of where we're putting billboards up of you to promote the show. There was one wave of billboards that you did first, which was you dressed in like Calvin Klein commercial or something like that.
Yeah.
And then there was the whole splits. Like,
Yeah, man.
If you could just tell the story of those two billboards.
Let me tell you now, the Baker Boys, I remember when the Baker Boys got their billboards. And I remember driving around with the Baker Boys because the Baker Boys were doing mornings at the time. And I remember people like, oh man, there's one on such and such. We would drive over there and look at the billboard. And then when I got to the mornings, it became a morning show campaign. It was like, oh, you got to do billboards. And at that time, it was like this Calvin Klein ad. And a lady by the name of Diana Jason, she was like, have you seen, because we're pitching ideas, and she was like, have you seen the billboard with the Calvin Klein people? She was like, yeah, if we did something, close to that, because they just wanted me to lay down and do the billboard. I'm 400 something pounds. So we go do the shoot, and I'm in there, they do your tap on, your makeup, the cameras are set. They had no idea that I was gonna walk out in my boxers and shoot the billboard. No shirt, boxers, that's it. When I came out, I could tell by the reaction in the room, I was like, that's the reaction LA's gonna get. And I didn't feel like, oh, they're gonna laugh at me, because I was so comfortable in my skin. I celebrated being this size. I celebrated being big boy. And when that billboard went up, bro, the phone calls, what it did for the numbers, because radio back then, now everything is recorded. Radio back then was kind of, when people say, oh, you got a face for radio, that's because they didn't see you. You know what I'm saying? You had a voice. Radio was sights unseen, voices that's heard. You just heard the voices. I was the most recognizable, one of the most recognizable people in radio in Los Angeles because of that billboard. The billboard campaign of me in my boxers, and then the billboard campaign, and I had some in between, but the one with me doing the splits, those were billboards that were iconic. People still bring those billboards up to this day. I remember Dr. Dre, he was talking to me one day and he said, hey, Big, that billboard, how did they do that? How did they do that with the billboard, with you doing the splits? And I was like, Dre, I said, this is years ago now. And this is when the billboard was up. I said, Dre, I said, that's me doing the splits. He was like, no, man, like, how did they do it? They put your head on somebody else's body? I'm like, Dre, that's me. That's not you, man. Get the fuck out of here. So then my boy Fuzzy, we've done this before. My boy Fuzz was like, nah, man, that's not him. Fuzzy know that it's me. Fuzzy was at the shoot. So I'm telling Dre, man, it's me. We'll do it right now. Nah, man, you got to pay. Like, how much? I'm like, no, it's not. And Fuzzy working him. It's not him. So Dre was like, man, I give you $5,000. You do it right now. I'm like, all right. It's him and Philip Atwell. I'm like, all right, come over here. And so I'm looking at them, $5,000 on the table. I just start going down slow. Boom! Hit the ground. Oh! I pick up the $5,000, right? And then that day, we were with Dre, and they had to go do a thing called the Farm Club with Jimmy Iovine at the time, right? So literally, we go from the video shoot for exhibit, and we go to the Farm Club. And so same day, Snoop is on stage, right? And they're sound checking. And Snoop was like, hey, cuz, hey, Big, cuz, how they do that billboard? And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, your head in the splits. I said, Snoop, that's me doing the splits. Oh, cuz, that's not you. No, Snoop, that's me doing the splits. Here come Fuzzy. That's not him. I'm like, Fuzz, you know that's me. Oh, cuz, do it. And then as soon as I'm like, we're running the routine, running our scheme on him, I'm like, man, that's me. Then I hear, hey, Snoop, don't bet that N-words got me for $5,000 a day. Dre must have been somewhere with like hot ears and heard us about to hustle Snoop and stop that 5,000. But that was me all day. 500 pounds, boom, to the ground.
Where did you learn to do the split?
As a kid, you just, you're fluid. And that and, the little bit of martial arts. And I was always a guy that stretched. Like, I never stopped doing the splits. And then I think once you get to like 300, 400, 500 pounds, probably as soon as I opened up my legs, I was gonna go down anyway. You know what I'm saying? So,
It's gravity.
yeah. Gravity was gonna pull me down anyway. You know, just make sure you didn't go down too hard to, you know, so you can keep your package and have some kids down the line.
Talk about when your mother died, you had this like kind of nice moment with her with the hometown buffet. Or
Oh
whatever.
yeah. And that's around. It's crazy because, like when my billboards went up, right? I told you the so-called phenomenon with the billboards, and I remember my mom was in the hospital, and she was like not doing well, and somehow my mom, you know, got well. My mom, I sent her a limousine to pick her up from the hospital, and they brought my mom home. And I remember I told her, I said, Mom, I said, my billboards are up. And this is the Calvin Klein, this is, you know, me and my boxers. And she was like, baby, she said, I want to see your billboards, and I want to go to Hometown Buffet. My mom didn't ask for a lot. I can do that. You know what I'm saying? And so,
You all right? You want to talk about it or?
my mom, you know, like she didn't ask for a lot. And so she told me, she said, I want to go see your billboards. And I want to go to Hometown Buffet. So I'm like, all right, cool. I pick her up and I put her, at this time, you know, she had just came out the hospital. I put her in my car, in my Suburban, and I'm driving around to the billboard, right? And I go and it's this one humongous billboard. And the lights are shining up at the billboard. It was the perfect billboard to take her to. It was on like Ventura and something in the valley. And I remember there was a parking lot, like for a liquor store, and I parked. And I remember I rolled her window down, and I saw my mom look up from the back seat, and she looked up at the billboard. And I'm out there, and this is her son, this is her baby, and Big Boy, Power 106. I'm in my boxers, and it's lit up, and it's humongous. And I remember she just looked, and she just giggled, and she said, that's my baby. And she looked at the billboard, and I was like, man, we gotta take her. I gotta take her to Hometown Buffet. We drive to Hometown Buffet, and when I get to Hometown Buffet, it's extremely crowded. So it's getting late. I know my mom, you know, at this time she's kind of like in a wheelchair assisted. And so I was like, Mom, I said, do you still want to go? And I knew she wanted to go, but she was like, no, she said, we can go another day. So I was like, okay. So I took her from Hometown, I took her to Sizzler. And I was like, man, Mom, I'll pick you up and I'll take you to Hometown Buffet on another day. And this was a Saturday. So I was gonna take her the next week. So Tuesday, my mom went back to the hospital, and her health started to deteriorate. And she ended up dying on that stint in the hospital. She never came back home. So to this day, I purposely have never been to a Hometown Buffet. Even when times when Hometown Buffet was really going, they wanted me to do a ribbon cutting ceremony and wanted to pay me an appearance fee. And I was like, I would not go to Hometown Buffet because the one time I was supposed to go was with my mom. And if I didn't go with my mom, I would never go. And to this day, my mom died March 31st, 1999. And to this day, I would never go into a Hometown Buffet. And I don't use the word never. I mean, literally, I could be starving. And that's the only place for 3, 4, 5 hours. I won't even tell you to bring me a plate out. I won't go.
Just getting to, I guess we can't talk about this without talking about the Will Smith weight loss challenge. So if you could just talk about that, and then the surgery, and then you met your wife around this time too.
It's crazy because years ago, at 500 pounds, 500 plus pounds, I had Will Smith in. And Will Smith, it's Will Smith. We're having a good time, we're clowning. This wasn't Will Smith's first time in the neighborhood. And so at one point when the interview was over, or while we were between something, but it was a quiet enough room, and Will said, hey, Big, how old are you? And I tell him my age around that time. And I'm in the happiest place, I'm thinking. And he said, man, Big, he said, how much, not bad, but, how much do you weigh? And I'm guesstimating for something like that. And he said, man, Big, he said, man, he said, what about your heart? And I never really, every doctor growing up, you need to lose weight. You know that there is no healthy, severe morbid obesity that I had, speaking for me. And so he said, hey, man, he said, why don't we do like a weight loss challenge? And I'll pay you $1,000 for every pound that you lose. And I'm thinking like, you know what? I would do that. I would do that, $1,000 per pound for charity. He's like, we'll wrap it around charity. You pick a charity, I pick a charity, and we'll do a huge donation after 6 months. I'll check in with you from the road, and I'll come in and we'll talk. So in my head, I want to do this challenge, but I want to do this challenge not for my health. I want to do this challenge for radio. Dude, I got Will Smith, $1,000 per pound for charity. He's gonna check in from the road and come in and check on me. This is radio gold. It wasn't about my health. It was about radio and how I would have Will Smith. It wasn't about getting healthier, getting healthy, losing weight, none of that. So the first week, I lost 26 pounds. That's $26,000. And that's off of a 500-pound frame, right? I could lose weight like that off of that frame. Anybody else you think's 26 pounds, you're not losing that because, I could take that off just in water. $26,000. Oh man, Big, damn, that's crazy. 26, we're counting, All right, Will, when you gonna catch up with me again? I'm doing radio, I'm not doing health. Oh, well, all right, I'm out here, I'll check in with you, such and such. All right, cool. Big boy losing weight, Will Smith challenge, Will Smith weight challenge. I'm living a life with this radio thing that's going to last for ratings period and everything, right? Fast forward, it's the final weigh-in. We got the news there. Will Smith is there. We got the presentation, big check that we're going to put the number in as soon as I get on the scale. So now it's weight loss day. We're live on the news, and Will Smith is here, and big boy, the challenge has come to an end. $1,000 for each pound lost. So now I'm getting on the scale, right? And I'm literally like in my boxers and a t-shirt. And as I'm walking up on this step-on scale, because I had to get weighed by special scales. So I walk onto the scale, and literally while I'm on the scale, looking down at the number, I'm thinking, soon as I get out of here, I'm gonna go to La Fogata's and get me some chicken nachos. Soon as I get out of here. I weigh in, I lost 111 pounds with Will Smith. He cut that check for $111,000, right? On the way home, not thinking of health, the radio bit's over. I drive straight to La Fogata's. I get the nachos, right? Next thing I know I'm putting this weight back on because I'm doing nothing to keep it off. Nothing. The radio bit is over. People, hey, how's your weight loss going? How's your weight loss going? You couldn't tell I was gaining weight because I was still big, But I remember I just was walking through the Burbank airport, and I had a trainer. I could do 35. It was 18 steps. I could do 35 of those. Like, I wasn't the big guy that had to park at the closest spot and breathing heavy. I was a guy that got to it. I'm walking in the Burbank airport one day, and I start getting this pain in my back. I'd never had that pain before. And I had to stop, and I was like, oh, I was getting out of breath. I was losing my wind. That's never happened, because my weight loss was always gradual. Now I felt what my body felt like losing that 100 pounds and gaining it like that. So I'm putting it back on. So I go, one day I'm at this movie premiere, and this guy comes up to me and he's like, "Big boy," and I'm like, "Oh, what's up, man?" I'm looking at him like, "Who is this?" And he was like, it's Ron Lester. And I'm like, and Ron, the big guy from Varsity Blues. And I'm looking at him, I'm like, "Man, what did you do?" So he's telling me that he had gastric bypass surgery, so on and so forth. I wasn't interested in gastric bypass surgery, but I'm at the movie premiere and I'm looking at him sit in his seat and I'm like, damn, that's crazy. Dude lost a lot of weight. Now with me, every time I flew, I either bought 2 seats or I had to fly first class. I could accommodate being 400 or 500 pounds. If I needed a suit, I can get a suit made because I can tailor make a suit and I could accommodate being 500 pounds. If I needed a car, I get a Suburban, bigger car, I could accommodate being 500 pounds. So I could accommodate this 500 pounds. I was comfortable in my skin. But for some reason, that night and then for a while, it just kept coming back to me like, "Big, you're gaining weight. What are you gonna do? You've tried diets, you know?" And I just started looking into gastric bypass. And I was looking, and it wasn't the end all. For me, it wasn't the, you don't have willpower. I've done that. I've done so much in my life with that did take willpower, but I felt like I needed something to help me with this weight. And I remember I was 32 and I said to myself, I said, "Big, you know, you gotta be 500 pounds, you know?" And I said, "You're 32. Do you have more life behind you than you have in front of you?" And out of all the celebration of being big boy and billboards and, you know, I could be 500 pounds. I know how to live like this. I can accommodate it. When I said, "Do you have more life behind you than in front of you?" I was like, yeah, you have more life behind you. I've never seen a 500 pound, 64-year-old man. And if I did see it, was he without, you know, walking on something or you know, some kind of oxygen? Was he living a full life, even if he was 64? So I started looking into gastric bypass. And there was one called the duodenal switch, which was the same one that Ron Lester got. So I started talking to the doctor with this work for me, you know, talking to my family. Of course, my family, the only thing they hear is, you know, you could die. But I could die with my heart exploding in my chest at, you know, whatever weight I was. I didn't even know my weight. And so I was like, I'm going to do it. But I went through everything. I went through, you know, am I still going to be funny? Am I still gonna be big boy? Are people still gonna rock with me and love me the way that they did? Am I changing who I am? And I said to myself, I said, you know what? It's not gonna matter because you're gonna be dead in a year anyway. I felt that I was gonna be dead. And I'm not that, "Oh, I got something, I gotta go to the doctor." Oh, I wasn't going to the extreme. I knew that I was gonna be dead in a year. So I went and I got the gastric bypass. And when I did the Will Smith challenge, I was 511 pounds when we first started. And when I went to go get the gastric bypass, when I stepped on the scale, I was 511 pounds. And that was after going to the doctor, and I didn't even get my weight before I went. He said, "We have an opening. You got 2 weeks, lose as much weight as you can." Now I already lost 26 pounds with Will Smith, and that was still kind of like, you know, let me do a little something. How much weight did I lose focused in 2 weeks? So if I was 511, I had to be 550 pounds before I lost that weight to be 511 to get the surgery. And that gastric bypass, it changed my life. And like I said, I live by the dimmer. My mom died at 57. I didn't think, "Oh, my mom died. I gotta get my stuff together." You know, other people dying. It was at one point when my mom died, you know, watching, you know, her with congestive heart failure, watching other people, it was like this dimmer. And then I looked up and now the room was bright and I was like, you got to do something or else you're going to die, you know? And I tell people to this day, gastric bypass is the last thing for me that you will want to get. If you got a 52 card deck, that's the 52nd card that you pick up. And then the procedure that I had is called the duodenal switch. That surgery is so extreme, they don't even do that surgery. You'll probably find someone if you're severe, morbid, obese, but that's not even an option that a doctor would throw at you right now. To this day, I'm still on supplements. I'm on proteins. I get blood work every month. Like, there's a way that I had to live with this gastric bypass and paying attention to my body, making sure I put energy food in. You know, it took me 10 years to just learn nutrition. It took me 10 years and I say, oh, I can eat this because I'm gastric bypass. I felt what the effects of eating fried foods, eating this, going off too much. So I just had to learn, but it took me like a decade to get, you know, because I had a love affair. You know, food was always there for me. Anything I wanted to eat, and once I got into radio and had some money, I can get it at any capacity. So now you're teaching yourself how not to kill yourself. You're teaching yourself how to eat and stay alive. And that was before I had kids. Now it's a whole different purpose. I did that for me. I did that to keep Big Boy and Kurt Alexander alive. You know, when I was 500 pounds, I met my wife at 500 pounds, you know. So my survival was for me, and for me to be able to take care of everything that's around me. When you get on the plane, the first thing they tell you is secure your mask. I was securing everyone's mask but mine. My family was fine. This person was fine. Friends were fine, but I was going to be dead. So when I got on the scale, I was ranked as severe, morbid obese. And I changed my life.
Do you still feel like Big Boy after at a healthy weight?
I do, because I am Big Boy. And I've heard it all. You know, every time I see Floyd Mayweather, I don't think he remembers, but I got like 50, man, we can't call you Big Boy anymore. Like, and I got to play it off with Floyd. Like, I never heard that before, especially from you. But nah, I feel like Big Boy. What's crazy about it, I've been gastric bypass for 20 years, right? Even when I leaned over to look in this mirror, I still trip off of that. Every day, I'll walk past a reflection, every day. And I'll look, and I'm like, oh, like, that's me. I'm not used to this. I still go buy clothes thinking I can't fit into it. I don't know what for the 20 years of being gastric bypass and being this size, with the 30 years of obesity, that has taken over my brain and my psyche more than this. I'll see something, I'm like, oh, I can't fit that. Then I put it on, I'm like, oh, shit. You know, so I still kind of see that big guy. And it also flipped me to where I see how I must have looked to other people, and I see how people had a prejudice that I wasn't in the club for. You know, maybe they thought I was big and greedy and sloppy and everything, because I hear certain things now. I see when I would walk down on the plane, I could see in people's eyes on Southwest, like, oh my God, don't let them sit next to me, you know? And now I see that from other people, and I'm like, oh, I know what they're doing. I know what they're doing. I was there, you know, I was there. So, and I'll look at people now and I'll see a big guy, and I'm like, damn, he's big. And then I was like, dude, you probably weighed 150 pounds more than him. Any of my friends that I speak with, my wife, anyone, I asked them, and I have for many years, was I the biggest person you knew? They was like, yes, you were the biggest person you knew. We knew. And I remember at one time I would say, oh man, you know, I weighed 510 pounds, 5'10", you know, but I was 5'11". But I remember when Liz that worked with me, she was like, big, she said, that didn't even sound like weight, that sounded like a flight number. You, Liz? No.